Fishing is supposed to be peaceful, a way to connect with nature to escape the rush of everyday life. But even on calm, quiet waters where there's only the sound of waves and wind, some have come face to face with something much darker. Tonight, I'll tell you 4 true stories, 4 fishing trips that began like any other, but ended in memories that haunt to this day. If you've ever paddled a kayak alone at sunset or camped on a quiet, empty beach, you'll want to listen closely. Story 1. The Red Barrel by the Lake. I live in Parsonfield, a small, quiet town in Maine. Not far from my house is a lake hidden behind a thick wall of pine trees. There's no marked trail to it, no dock, no visitors. It's my secret place where I go to escape the world. I kept my kayak there propped against a big tree on the shore. It was heavy and stable enough that I never worried about it tipping. I just covered it with a tarp to keep animals from nesting inside. It was on that lake one summer evening that I saw something that's kept me awake many nights since. The sun was setting. I had caught a few trout and was about to paddle in when I heard a strange sound coming from the opposite shore. I turned and saw a man. He was tilting a large barrel, pouring something into the water. At first I thought he was dumping trash or waste, but the liquid that came out looked dark, thick, like blood. I couldn't be sure it was getting dark, but the color, it wasn't right. It was heavy and slow, drifting on the surface in wide, oily swirls. I shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man turned just for a split second, but the way his eyes locked onto me from across the lake, it chilled me. He didn't say a word. He turned and ran straight into the woods, leaving the barrel still leaking by the shore. A sense of dread started crawling over me. I love nature, always have. But this wasn't normal. I quickly paddled back to my spot, packed my gear, and started covering the kayak. Just as I crouched to tie the tarp down, I heard a sharp snap like a branch breaking underfoot. I shot upright, was about to yell hello, but stopped myself. No answer. I didn't even bother standing the kayak up properly like I usually did. I just threw the tarp over it and left moving fast through the trees, eyes glancing back every few steps. Once I got home, I locked the door. Something I'd never done so quickly before. After cleaning the fish and putting them in the fridge, I was reheating leftovers when a knock at the door. My heart nearly stopped. Who knocks at 10 p.m.? I hadn't turned on the porch light. The curtains were drawn. Another knock. Then, a tap on the window. A man's voice, low, tired. "Sorry. I think you saw me at the lake earlier. I just want to explain." I froze. He had followed me home. I yelled, "Get out of here. I'm calling the cops." His voice didn't change, still calm. "You just need to open the door. I'll explain everything." I shouted again, louder, threatening to call 911. Silence. I locked every window, turned on the AC to drown out any outside sound. Then I called the police and also filed a report with the Environmental Protection Agency. I tried to sleep, but I'm a light sleeper, and around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. Someone was in the house. I grabbed my Glock from the closet, took position behind a dresser, aiming at the bedroom door. The doorknob turned, slowly. The door creaked open, and a shadow stepped inside, barely lit by the dim hallway glow. I flicked on the light. "Get on the ground. Drop the weapon." He froze, raised his hands. In his left, a small blade. He whispered, "I'm leaving," then turned and bolted. I chased him down the stairs, but he slipped out the front door. I called 911 immediately. Police arrived and investigated. They took my statement and went back with me to the lake. The barrel was gone. I described the man: white, short, beard, glasses, black flannel shirt. After they left, I found something jammed beneath the front door, a small, damp piece of paper. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "You weren't supposed to see that." Story 2. The Hole by the Lake and the Black Gun. I'm almost 60 now. I've spent nearly my entire life fishing. My wife always jokes that if I don't go fishing at least once a week, I'll probably lose my mind, and she might not be wrong. I live in a remote rural area in northern New York State. There's a small lake deep in the forest, no name on the map, barely anyone knows about it. Locals call it Grumble Lake because at night sometimes the water bubbles up and makes deep, strange rumbling noises. I'd heard those stories as a kid, but I never experienced it myself until last spring. That day I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still gray as I drove out to the lake. I brought my kayak and all my gear, planning to spend the whole morning out there. But as soon as I reached the water's edge, I stopped in my tracks. Across the lake, I saw 3 men dressed in dark clothing, wearing hoods that obscured their faces, digging a large hole at the shoreline. I couldn't see clearly from that distance, but something about the way they moved made my stomach tighten. I pulled a pair of binoculars from my pack. That's when I saw one of the men reach into the hole and pull something out. Then the second. Then the third. But instead of burying anything, they threw it all into the lake, one item at a time, each splash echoing in a steady, ritual-like rhythm. I ducked behind a tree out of instinct. My heart was pounding. I waited, holding my breath, until they finally disappeared into the woods. I knew I should have just left, but curiosity outweighed fear. I paddled my kayak across to where they'd stood. I wasn't there to fish anymore. This time I was looking for something else. I remembered I had brought a bottom scanner with me. I ran back to the car, grabbed it, and returned to the spot. The lake bed was soft, muddy, until the scanner bumped into something solid, something metallic buried deep in the muck. I marked the location, swapped out my fishing lure for the largest hook I had, lowered the line slowly, eyes locked on the surface. Then a faint resistance, a gentle tug. I reeled it in carefully, slowly. When it broke the surface, I already knew what it was. A gun. Black, soaked, and very, very real. My hands were shaking so badly the kayak tipped sideways. I wrapped the weapon in my raincoat, never touching it barehanded, and paddled back to shore as fast as I could. First thing I did was call the police. When they arrived, I led them to the marker. They recovered more items, a large ring of keys, some foreign coins, a silver locket. Inside was a faded photo, too damaged to make out. They told me they'd be in touch if anything came of it. I never heard back. I tried to move on. But a few nights later, I woke up to sounds outside. Voices, a whisper. "That's the car." "I'm sure it is." I looked out the window. Figures moving slowly around my yard. No knocking, no flashlights, just pacing. I called the police again. They came, took a report, left. No arrests, no answers. And the questions still haunt me. Why were those items buried? Why did they come back, not to take them, but to throw them away? Or maybe someone was trying to erase every trace, and I had stumbled into the middle of a deadly game. Story 3. The Stranger on the Empty Beach. Last fall, my 2 best friends, Kevin and Arian, and I decided to do a bit of night fishing at my family's beach house. The place sits right by a quiet lagoon, a spot my grandfather bought back in the 1970s. This time of year, stripers usually come out at night, and we figured it'd be our last good chance before the cold really hit. My small boat was in the shop for repairs, so we opted to fish from the beach. Kevin said he knew of a secluded sandbar about 15 minutes away. We followed a narrow, unlit road through the woods, ending at a gravel parking lot that looked long abandoned. We brought everything: rods, bait, folding chairs, 2 coolers, one for fish, one for beer and snacks. Arian had a little Bluetooth speaker playing soft jazz, as if we had our own private outpost in the middle of nowhere. The moon wasn't very bright, but it was enough to see the long stretch of sand ahead. The sound of waves lapping the shore and the salty breeze made the night feel almost peaceful. Until Arian suddenly stopped, turned down the speaker, and whispered, "Did you guys hear that?" We listened. Nothing but waves. Sounded like someone said, "Hey," from the woods. He muttered again, this time more quietly. We laughed it off, told him he was hearing things. But something shifted. The air felt different, like a thread had been pulled. Not fear exactly, but awareness. A few minutes later, I noticed a dark shape at the far end of the beach, someone walking toward us. Slow. No flashlight. No voice. Just a quiet, steady silhouette. We turned off the music. As the figure approached, the details came into view: a middle-aged white man in a dark blue jacket with the hood pulled up. His clothes were soaked as if he'd just come out of the ocean. He didn't say a word, just stood there a few meters away, staring at each of us in turn. Then at our fishing rods. Then back out toward the sea. I forced a smile and said, "Just doing a little fishing, man." He gave a slow nod, then asked, "You boys, planning to stay out here all night?" None of us answered. He stood there for a few more seconds, then turned around and walked off just as silently as he came. We watched his shape fade into the darkness. None of us turned the music back on. About 20 minutes later, my car alarm went off. A piercing blast in the still night. We froze. My car was the only one in the lot, surrounded by woods. No one else was supposed to be here. We dropped everything and ran. When we reached the parking area, what we saw made my stomach drop. Tires slashed. Passenger window smashed. My wallet gone. Kevin's entire tackle set gone. And sitting on the driver's seat was a large hunting knife, along with a small, damp, sand-covered note. "Next time, don't leave a trail." I called the police while Kevin and Arian stood guard. As I was speaking to dispatch, I heard branches snapping. Somewhere nearby. Someone was in the woods. We ran. Took cover in a thicket about 200 meters away. 10 minutes later, the beams of 2 patrol cars swept across the trees. We jumped out yelling for help. They found footprints, another knife half buried in the sand, and confirmed there were at least 2 individuals seen circling the area. We got out safe. But I know that man wasn't alone, and he didn't stumble onto that beach by accident. He knew we'd be there. Story 4. The Tribe in the Fog. I grew up in a family where fishing wasn't just a hobby, it was tradition. My dad, my uncles, and their closest friends lived for time on the water. It was their rhythm, their peace. But there was one trip where my father came back with a look in his eyes, blank distant, as if he'd seen something that didn't belong to this world. He only ever told the story 3 times, and each time his voice grew quieter, slower, like the memory still sat heavy on the back of his neck. That day, he and his friends Matthew, Rich, Jeff, and Monty set off before dawn. They were headed to a remote inlet 2 hours upriver by boat, a place so hidden you wouldn't even know it existed unless someone told you. Dense, untouched forest surrounded it on all sides. The morning was calm. They drank beers, joked around, and cast lines for hours. But by late afternoon, the fog rolled in. Not the kind you'd expect near water. This was thick, so dense my dad said it felt like the boat had been swallowed by a massive gray stomach. Rich, the oldest of the group, kept mumbling that he'd never seen fog like that before. When their phones lost signal, they decided to head back, but Matthew, who was piloting the boat, nearly crashed into a rocky shore. With visibility near zero, they had no choice but to anchor down and stay the night. Dad, Jeff, and Rich decided to hike inland a bit, hoping to find higher ground for a signal. Dad even brought a flare gun, just in case they got separated. They turned on their flashlights and stepped into the woods. The beams of light sliced through the fog, scattering like liquid among the trees. And then, they started hearing it. Click, click, click. Like fingernails tapping dry wood, rhythmic, deliberate. A strange pattern, almost like a coded message meant for the forest alone. The clicking echoed from ahead, then behind, then all around them. Rich whispered, "Turn off the lights. Don't let them see us." In the pitch black beneath a thicker darkness than fog alone could explain, every sound felt sharp, near amplified. Silence wrapped around them until something rustled. Close. Then came a scream. Not an animal. Not human either. A broken, savage howl echoing through the trees as if something was being torn apart. They didn't speak. They just ran. Dad fired the flare gun behind them. The red light tore through the mist, and in that brief flash, they saw them. A group of people, more than 10, standing between the trees wearing dark cloths and crude wooden masks. Some held sharpened spears, all of them perfectly still, watching. Jeff tripped, screaming. Rich grabbed him, yanked him up, and they bolted through the brush, shouting for Matthew to start the engine. Just as they hit the shore, the engine roared to life. The boat surged forward, and on the bank behind them stood the group. One of them was a child, frozen in place, head tilted, arm raised, pointing directly at them. Dad fired the second flare. For a few seconds, the fog glowed blood red, and there they were, about 15 of them, all still, not chasing, just watching. The boat drifted until they killed the motor. No one spoke, just breath and heartbeats in their ears. That night, no one slept. They took turns keeping watch, waiting for the sun. When morning came, they headed home. While cleaning the boat later, my dad found something he never told anyone about except me. At the bottom of the boat, a strange symbol, etched into the floor like it had been carved with stone or claw. None of them knew where it came from. None of them returned to that inlet ever again. Fishing is a sport of patience, but in all 4 of these stories, no one was waiting for a bite. They were waiting to see if they'd make it back alive. If you've ever been alone in the wild, you know how terrifying silence can be when it feels like someone's watching you. Always stay alert, because the scariest thing isn't always what's beneath the water. It's what's watching you from the tree line behind the reeds, or just beyond the edge of your flashlight beam. Have you ever had a terrifying experience while fishing or camping? Leave your story in the comments. I'm always listening, and maybe your story will be the next nightmare I tell.